Should you start a rent-to-rent business in 2023? Many people that get started look at this as a starting strategy and they're told it's a nice, easy cash flowing opportunity to be able to get going with property. However, with all the changes that happen, is it too late? Have you missed the boat? Or is there still opportunities in rent-to-rent in 2023? Hey, if you're watching my videos for the first time, my name is Saj Hussain, and on this channel I share with you my 15 plus years of property investing experience to ultimately help you get further faster in your own property investing business. Rent to rent can be a great cash flowing strategy and certainly a popular strategy amongst people who are just getting started in property, and they're often told this is the place that you can build cash flow. However, this year's strategy has been popular now for a number of years. In fact, I was teaching courses and seminars on it probably about 8 years ago when it was still in its infancy at that time. The idea of rent to rent is really simple. It's about taking on a property that you're renting from the owner of a property and then taking it to the market and re-letting that back out, maybe to a different audience to who the owner was originally letting that property to, so that you can make a profit in the middle. You might incur some costs that you have with setting that up, but generally it's sitting in the middle and making a profit. Some people also akin this to that being of a letting agent, which is where you're managing property and you're sitting in the middle between the owner of the property and the tenants. The reason this strategy has become super popular over the years is the perception is you don't need a huge amount of money to get started because you're just renting a property as opposed to purchasing it and then you're re-renting that back out to somebody else and you'll have that margin in the middle. But that margin can be quite substantial. It could be a few £100, maybe £500, or in some cases £1,000 plus that you're making sitting in the middle. And let's say you had 2 or 3 or maybe 4 rent-to-rents. For many people, that's more than what they're currently earning in the day job. In our business, when we look at how to profit from property, we essentially talk about 3 ways to do that. You're either creating cash flow, a monthly profit each month from renting property, or you're taking cash out of a property, maybe you're flipping, or you're building equity for the long term. This strategy certainly falls into the cash flow category where you're building up income that you're creating each month. Now, some people refer to it as a passive income. Personally, I don't think this is something that falls in the passive category because it requires quite a lot of time and effort to set up and to build and to operate and run as well. So the time and effort you're putting into, effectively you're exchanging time for money. Really, the smart approach to building this business is about building the foundations, initially putting the time and effort in, but putting the systems in place and also people that can operate those systems, and that's something you can scale. But scaling this business isn't necessarily something you should be doing, because the other option is you use it as a stepping stone. That means what you do, you take on 2, 3, 4 of these I mentioned earlier, and that's enough to replace the day job. So that means now you have time freedom and you don't necessarily continue to grow that property. You look for other strategies that maybe are investment strategies. A few people will go on to build this as a substantial business, which means you're managing a large amount of property. You'll also have systems and staff operating those. Your overheads are higher, but yes, you can certainly make very good money from it. So why is it different starting rent-to-rent now versus say in 2015, a few years ago? Well, really the big change is the awareness in the marketplace. People are much more aware of what this particular strategy is. So as I mentioned earlier, when we were teaching this about 8 years ago, at that time really the concept was we're ringing up agents, we're making a proposal to them where we can take on a property, a guaranteed rent with no voids as a long-term let, and it's quite an attractive proposition. These days, if you were to ring up an agent and make that kind of proposition, they'll probably say to you, oh, do you mean rent-to-rent? Because they've had it pitched to them so often, it's much more common to hear this phrase. And a lot of agents have also had bad experiences as well, or have heard of bad experiences from other agents. They're completely shut down and won't let you take the conversation any further. Now, when we first started doing this and when we first started teaching this, the primary focus was on taking a standard property or a tired HMO and turning that into a more modern, popular HMO. Popular being in a sense it looks more attractive, is marketed to the right kind of audience to make that work, and we make a profit in the middle. But what's also evolved over the last few years, that there's another strategy that's quite popular as well, is service accommodation or the short stay business or Airbnb model, where what we're doing is taking the property, but rather than letting it to multiple number of people, what we're doing is starting to make it available on a nightly basis, so the amount of income we generate from that property increases significantly because it's charged on a nightly rate, as opposed to increasing the income because of the number of people that are living in a property, i.e. in a HMO. Before you can consider whether this is the right strategy for you to be using in 2023, is to think about what is the kind of product that you're trying to create and take to the market. So for example, if you're taking family houses to the market to run a short stay, you need to understand who is it that's going to be staying there, who you're targeting. Or if you're taking a family house and turning it into HMO, who is it you're going to be letting those rooms to? Is it students? Is it social housing? Is it asylum seekers? What kind of market are you taking that property to, and who is it that you're going to serve? This way you can look at what's the product that you're starting with versus what the ones that you're trying to create, to see is there a market for that, what's the demand for that, what sort of price point will people pay. So ultimately you can work out what your running costs are going to be and what the margin is in between. Although in our industry, this strategy is painted as a nice, easy strategy to be able to make cash flow quite quick and hey presto, next year you're going to be rich. The reality is it requires a lot of work, but also a level of expertise as well. It's understanding, for example, how the HMO market works, the compliance, the different types of sectors within the market, either different customer types that you might have staying at the property, but also if you're going to run it as a short stay business, that's understanding a completely different model as well. So you're generally going to pick one or the other. You're either going to go rent to HMO or rent to service accommodation, and understanding who might be staying in the property, how you need to create the property to serve that client type. There's often also talk about you don't need a huge amount of money to get started in this strategy, and although that's true to an extent, you could take a property on, you're not putting up very much money at the beginning and you're just getting operational, you still need some money around you. For example, it might be deposit you need to pay, you might need to pay rent in advance for the property, you might have some work you might need to property just to get it in order and tidy it up. There may be furnishing costs, there might be appliances you need to purchase, there might be a number of weeks before you're operational and the money starts coming in and you've got overheads to cover. So you should have some money around you, although some people talk about doing this with no money. The reality is you should really have some money around you in order to be able to build this as a business. My belief is if this is a strategy that you want to explore in 2023, then really the easiest way to do this is think about who you already know that has property, investment property, rental property that you could go to and have a conversation with, maybe working with them to deploy this strategy on their property. So it could be on a partnership basis, it could be you're trialing it, but really what you're able to do is dip your toe in it and see if you even like it, because it does require a lot of work and effort. And although people are obsessed with the money that you can make from it, people forget about the work and time and effort that's required to be able to build it and get this working in the first place. As those that get started in this business, many fall at the first hurdle, which is finding the property. So if you can resolve that problem by going to friends, family that may already have property and maybe testing in one of those properties, that's a much easier route to success than it is to try and get on the phone and start trying to sell this and pitch this to the letting agents that they've heard 100 times from many other people. And there are agents that still do this, I'm not saying they don't, but often they've already got relations with people they like to work with, like to give those properties to, because they trust them and understand them. I remember in the early days, one of the properties that we had it for a number of years, it was running really well, and this was through a letting agent. But when it came to the renewal of that lease, I think we had it for 5 years, the agent wouldn't renew it with us. And I thought, what's the issue? You know, we've been looking after this property, it runs really well, you know, there's no problems whatsoever. And it's only later we realized what the agent had done is taken the property from us in order to run it themselves, because they'd worked out what we're doing and thinking, hey, we're missing a trick here. Why are we allowing us to take on that property when they could do this the same themselves? We also had this experience with a couple of other agents afterwards as well, when they started realizing how this market works. So that opportunity there that existed, there was a lack of awareness and understanding in the market. That's now very different. The market is much more mature. So when we go into the market, we've got to think about what's the USP you're going with? How solid is your business offering? It was only yesterday at our property networking event that we have in this room that we had yesterday, and I was speaking to somebody there who said he'd gone to an agent and he'd agreed a deal and they're really happy to do it, but because he hadn't done this before, he had no experience, they wanted a year's rent up front and he was not in a position to pay that. And I can completely understand that, but the agent's really trying to protect themselves for any downside there. And finally, before you make a decision to enter this space, think about the skills that you already have and whatever you're doing right now that may be transferable in this sector. For example, let's say you come from a sales background, then you might find it's much more comfortable for you having a conversation with the agents to negotiate those deals versus somebody that may be, let's say, much more introverted, who prefers to do spreadsheets and is more analytical. But on the other hand, that analytical person may serve as a great person to be able to build the systems and the process in place in order to be able to build this system. So think about skills that you have. Are they transferable to this business? Will that give you some leverage and will that help you? So yes, in 2023, you can still make money from rent to HMO and rent to service accommodation. However, it's not as easy as it used to be. Think about what you have as leverage that you can already use to get you a head start, and that's what will give you the best success in 2023. When it does come to this strategy, there's a major mistake that people tend to make, and that's they don't understand the contracts and the right paperwork they need to put into place. The great news is I've got a video lined up next for you over here for you to watch, but just before you go and do that, make sure you click on my face over here just to subscribe to the channel, and then come watch this video where I explain the different type of contracts and which are the right ones to use when it comes to rent to rent.